Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hunting for Silver Linings. Today is Friday, April 16 here in the Great Lakes region of the United States. I'm the chapter director for Grand Rapids, Michigan for Startup Grind. Joined here with my colleague, Yorgo Katsanos. He is down in Toledo, Ohio. Is that right, Yorgo? Fantastic. And
enjoying the sunshine after snow yesterday.
I know, right? It's fun. It's fun. It's great. Yeah, so today is really a nice special event. It's the first time that we are welcoming an incoming chapter director from our newest cohort of directors, and representing the new chapter in Hamburg, Germany. We have Dirk joining us. Dirk, welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So Yorgo and I started this just as the shutdowns were occurring last year, and there was incredible uncertainty across the planet. We had a deep curiosity about what was happening around the world, and hopefully we would be able to glean some information and help make better decisions or advise our community of entrepreneurs here just from our global learnings. And it's been an incredible trip of well over 100 conversations. And
Wow.
the information and the community that we've built from it has provided incredible value for everyone who's participated. So your contribution is meaningful, and we're really grateful for the generosity of your time. Like to get started with a little background on who you are. You have a couple decades of experience of tending to flocks of entrepreneurs and to really championing innovation of all different kinds. And so you're exactly the kind of human that we love to have as part of the Startup Grind family. So let's learn a bit about you and why you are this way.
Yeah, okay. Basically, if I try to describe my lifeline, it would be a lifeline along failures and learnings. Yeah? So a lot of bad decisions, but a couple of good ones as well. So it's a bit equally distributed there. So I started originally in the advertising industry, and after that I founded my first startup, which lasted almost a year before it crashed. So that was the very first learning. I only had one client there back in the time, and when that client withdrew, then we had to close down the company. Second startup lasted a little longer, almost 5 years. Third one then was a exit. So we sold that one to a German retail company, which was pretty cool. Then the fourth one I founded was an acqui-hire. And so I got into the e-commerce fields because we were acquired by a company called Otto, which is Germany's second biggest e-commerce company right now, where I served for almost 5 years. Then back to the startup ecosystem as a CMO into the e-learning sector. And since almost 6 years now, I'm with a huge skincare company, Bayersdorf, where 3 years ago I started to build the startup scouting in the digital space because nobody was covering that by that time. And I had the feeling that there will be a lot of movement, especially in the digital fields, and that it will not only be creams and lotions in the future. And so this is when I started to really engage again with the startup ecosystem, but now from a new perspective. And this is how I came to Startup Grind, because then one of my trips brought me to San Francisco and to the Startup Grind Global Summit, and I found that it was a pretty cool, welcoming, warm-hearted, and helpful community. And so I said, okay, this is pretty cool, and this is what you want to be a part of, because of course, especially when I look at my own experiences, there's a lot of experience to give away, but it's pretty hard to find the right recipients, which is kind of interesting. And this is exactly the approach that I had, where I said, okay, now that there was an open position to found the chapter in Hamburg, I thought, this is exactly the opportunity that you were looking at. I have no clue how to do it yet. I have to admit that. So I'm simply a newbie, but nevertheless, that's part of the journey. I try things, fail, learn, and do it over again.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for that. I think the only way to do it is you've already been doing it. You've been helping people, and it's in our values. Give first, right? It seems like that runs through your career. If you just lean into that, I think you're going to be great. So, you have the benefit of having been to that global conference and feel all the warm vibes, like we say. It's all about the vibes, and we don't often get that as entrepreneurs. We often feel like we're stuck, we're alone, we're isolated. It's a lonely journey. But yeah, so thanks so much for taking that leap and launching in Hamburg. I think it's a critical area of Germany, of course, of Europe. It's Hamburg has some notoriety as far as being a spot for innovation. So, Yorgo, now that we have a little background on Dirk, do you have any questions about him before we get into learning about Hamburg?
First of all, I would like to congratulate Dirk for joining Startup Grind. I think it is a very exciting time in more than one ways. We have generational change, we have technological change, we have the experience of the millennial generation being succeeded by Generation Z with different demands, different expectations. And also we have big political changes that are happening in Europe at this stage in terms of Brexit, which is relatively recent, in terms of the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, coming to the end of her very long and successful career. And more important than that, we probably are coming towards the end of a negative interest rate policy that the European Central Bank has pursued aggressively. So against this background, I have to also mention that as we can see here in the map, Hamburg is literally at crossroads in Europe. Not only one of the oldest harbors, but also the location has been important throughout history and for several centuries. With areas, with sectors such as aviation, automotive, entertainment, biotechnology, Hamburg has been at the forefront of innovation for several decades, but more important than that, it has an open community, an open society. Can you talk to us a little bit about what do you think the strengths of Hamburg are going to be as we are going through these challenges, but also reflect a little bit on your experience with regard to COVID?
Yeah, sure. No problem. So thanks for the warm words about Hamburg, because I can totally resonate with that. Yeah, Hamburg indeed has a very special location inside Europe. Yeah, with the direct access to the North Sea, for example, being one of the biggest ports, harbors in throughout Europe, and being a retail city for decades now. And so retailing has always been part of our DNA here in Hamburg. Yeah, and this has led to a certain culture that people embrace, and that we try to embrace in the startup ecosystem as well, which is, for example, an attitude of reliability. So we really have a culture of doing things via handshake. Yeah, so it's not so much putting anything or everything into written contracts and lawyers and stuff like that, but it's you give a word and you keep the word. Yeah, so that's one thing that really makes Hamburg special. Another thing is the access to resources, and it's not resources in the classical way like we have oil or steel or anything like that, but it's access to intellectual capital, and it's access to money. Because Hamburg is, compared to other cities, a pretty wealthy city. Yeah, and we do have had some entrepreneurs back in our history. Werner Otto Warburg, who founded a very big bank, and all the people in the ship business and in the retail sector. So there is a lot of money, and one of the attitudes in Hamburg is that you do not show off your money, you put your money to work. Yeah, and this is maybe different to other cities. So you have a deed to do something good. So when you look at the buildings in Hamburg, most of them were, or a lot of them were privately financed, for example, which is also typical for the city. And when in times like these, where you have a lot of change and rapid change, I think the city of Hamburg is one of the best suited ones, because we have been living through change all of our history. In more than 850 years of the existence of the harbor, for example, there has always been change and always been challenges. I mean, Hamburg has been burnt down and bombed out and whatnot, and always has been rebuilt because of this specific location and the attitude that you find here. And then, of course, we call ourselves the gateway to the world, or in German is das Tor zur Welt. So, and this is very much our mindset as well. So, because Hamburg has always been a melting pot of cultures. Yeah, we have the huge influences, for example, from the Netherlands and from Great Britain on the other hand. So, Brexit is one thing that tackles us very immediately, because the connections between Hamburg and Great Britain are very, very tight. So still our pupil in school go to England for trips regularly. So it's part of our curriculum. So yeah, I think that makes Hamburg kind of special.
The topic of mindset that you brought up, I think, is very interesting, especially when we have there's stereotypes, right, of the German mindset. And Hamburg, because of the history that you're speaking about and the resilience of the region, and of course its location, makes it maybe an outlier of, say, the typical German attitude towards innovation and creativity. Is that reasonable to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why Hamburg has one of the biggest creative industries in Germany as well. Yeah, because you have to be creative to survive in a changing environment, and you have to be creative to survive in a global competition. And this is something that sets us apart from other cities throughout Europe, that we always have been in this global competition on one hand and global collaboration on the other hand. Yeah, so centuries ago there was a thing called an organization called the Hanse, which was roughly a connection of a couple of dozen cities from Gdansk in Poland to Hamburg in Germany, heavily trying to join their forces in protecting trade, for example. And this combination, competition and the collaboration on both sides, makes a very unique mixture. Yeah, and then of course the dozens of nationalities that we have. I think there are only 2 cities in the world that have more consulates than Hamburg does. Yeah, and this speaks for itself. So the international community here is just amazing. Yeah, and it's really fun to be part of that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because Germany, pre-pandemic, a lot of the conversation is about how many human beings can be accepted from around the planet and then integrated into society, regardless of how the citizenry in different parts of Germany were like, is this a good idea? And Hamburg seems to be a spot where they embrace that attitude. And so maybe you could speak to some of the ways that your region handled the pandemic and either pivoted, or maybe you have some examples, some entrepreneurs that you know, or companies that reacted.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So as you can imagine, the pandemic struck big parts of our economic and sort of ecosystem very hard. Yeah, but not only in a negative way, because being an online-oriented city with a good or very good infrastructure compared to the rest of Germany, not compared to other countries in the world, but to the rest of Germany. Of course, everything that's e-commerce related, for example, or online entertainment related, like our gaming industry, which is huge in Hamburg, has really gotten a push forward. Yeah, and this was really good. On the other hand, we do have startups. For example, there's a well-known startup, 2 years old or 3 years old, who do relocation, which was a really beautiful business before the pandemic, because so many companies, especially here in Hamburg, have expats coming in. They all have to be relocated. They have to know how to get an insurance and where to go with our administration, stuff like that. And suddenly, all of a sudden, the whole business went up in smoke. Yeah, and so of course they had to pivot. And what they did, for example, was to change quickly to software as a service for companies, to really say, okay, what are the services that you need in HR when you're dealing with different locations all over the world, and how can you do more on the informational ways? Yeah? And this is, I think, typical for a lot of startups that I know of, that they simply thought, okay, this is a huge pushback coming in through the pandemic, and parts of our business are simply, vanishing right now. So let's see, what else can we do? Yeah, and this is an attitude that you find here very, very often. Yeah, the Hamburg people have an attitude not to complain a lot. Yeah, it's more like, okay, let's call it what it is. It's shit. Yeah, but how do we get out of it? How do we deal with it? And that's something that really, I believe, in the long term, will give us an advantage, especially compared to other startup ecosystems that I know of. You know?
I have a question that is more practical, Dirk. Let's assume that Corey and I show up tomorrow in Hamburg, and we have a wonderful idea that is a new technology application, you name it. Let's call it also cryptocurrency related. How do we go about? Where do we start with? Do we start with angel investors? Do we call Dirk and say, Dirk, this is our idea. What do you think? What would your suggestion be? What is the optimal way of doing it?
At least I could tell you who to talk to. Yeah, and this is super important in our ecosystem, is the access to the network. So because there are a lot of opportunities and offers, the problem that we have is the Hamburg attitude is also a very quiet one, so nobody knows about it. And for example, we do have interesting offers from the city of Hamburg, grants, loans, and all of that. We have a lot of co-working spaces where dozens of events are happening every time, almost every single day. You can engage somewhere in the startup ecosystem in Hamburg. And so this is what I would give as an advice, to really dive into the ecosystem and talk to the different players. We have roughly, I would say, 50 to 100 people who are driving the ecosystem here. And I'm pretty happy and proud to be part of that community. So it's pretty easy to connect the dots there. And then we do have some organizations as well. For example, the ARIC, which is covering artificial intelligence. And we have the DESI, who are one of the most well-known scientific organizations that we have here, with our huge electron synchrotron that we are running here in Hamburg. And then we have the Port Authority and so on. So it's just, you need only to know 3 or 5 people here. And then if they open up your network, you can pretty easily get started here. So it's pretty cool.
So in terms of access to capital, you have both formal and informal networks. You have obviously a long history of, you mentioned the city. We know that there's a whole range of accelerators, incubators, and so on in Hamburg that have tremendous success. You also have a series of entrepreneurs who have had successful exits. So the ecosystem is fairly well developed. Here in North America, we've noticed that Canada has been at the forefront of giving working visas to young entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. What is happening with the work permits and similar issues in Germany? Is it easy for a young entrepreneur to get a job?
Yeah, it is, definitely.
Permits in particular.
So of course, one benefit is if you are from the European Union, you don't even need a working permit. You can work anywhere throughout the EU. But other than that,
I'm trying to convince Corey to become European, and he's getting closely willing to do that. So he won't have to work, get a special permit. But please, yes, continue.
Yeah, and other than that, it's pretty easy because we know that we need external know-how and we need immigrants to really keep our economy running. Yeah, so this is in the depth of our minds deeply settled, and so we make it easy for almost everybody to get here and get a working permit and to even start a business. Yeah, of course. There are some, let's call frictions when it comes to our bureaucracy, which is almost as bad as overall in Germany. So we have a tendency to have too much paperwork, too much things you have to do in person. You cannot do digital and all that. We know that we're lagging there a lot. But the pandemic has pushed this a lot forward. Throughout companies, throughout governments, everything is getting more and more digital. So we're keeping up there, and of course, if you are an external entrepreneur, you are more than welcome to settle here, and as you mentioned, we do have almost all the prerequisites. The only thing that we don't have is venture capital. Funny enough, we for the past 2 years we didn't have one venture capital company here in Hamburg. The last one left, I think 2 years ago. Now there's one again, which is an impact fund. Super interesting because they're really getting for climate change. And of course, we have, for example, the corporate venture capital that my company, for example, is engaged in. But the venture capital access is not as good, but the business angel access, on the other hand, is super good, because we have dozens of active business angels here in Hamburg. Usually, it's not easy to find them because we're no loudspeakers, as I said, but if you have access to the network, then it's pretty easy to get them.
I think what we're finding is that we're getting a lot of attention from some of the investors that are looking for regions like yours, where there's opportunities to come in and fill those funding gaps that have been exposed by the pandemic and the recent climate. So, Yorgo, you were going to ask.
Yes, I was actually going to continue in the same direction with Dirk, because it is interesting that for historical reasons, and now going back to the Hanseatic League, it was always the families. It was these very tight-knit networks that made sense. The idea of risk management was a family business. And of course, this is existing very importantly still today. However, what we have also seen is that Hamburg has opened to a broader ecosystem. Dirk mentioned links with the UK. I was actually going to mention links also with Eastern Europe, with Southern Europe, and more importantly, also Munich and the Alps. Can you talk to us a little bit about these kinds of networks?
Yeah, of course. As I said, the connections are numerous, and there are stronger connections and less stronger connections. Stronger connections, for example, we do have also into the Baltics, which is a super interesting region and a super strong ecosystem that's being built there. So especially when you look in the Nordics of there around Helsinki and what's happening there. Then of course we do have close collaboration, of course, with other major cities in Hamburg, in Germany. Munich, for example, where we have a regular exchange. And one interesting part there is that, for example, the big consultancy companies who are active in the startup ecosystem, they focus mainly on 3 or 4 German cities, which is Munich, Berlin, Hamburg, and Frankfurt. And so through that, you have the direct access into the other ecosystems as well. And so as we know that we have some topics that we cannot tackle city by city, but we have to tackle them as a country, we do have a very close interchange between those cities and the different startups ecosystem. So one of the few of the very first connections I had was with other startup grind chapters here in Germany, which is pretty awesome. So because it would in an instant, I was recognized as being one of the new players here in the ecosystem and got approached, and this is super cool. So
thank you. That is important because it lends further support to the overall ecosystem. In other words, you are able to touch upon expertise, know-how, relations within the community, the startup grind community. As I'm looking again both geography but also history, and I'm looking at music, aviation, shipping, trading. The applications that come to mind, the sectors that come to mind are supply chain management, fintech, cryptocurrencies, and so on and so forth. From your perspective, which are the sectors that are driving attention, both from the entrepreneurs, but also from the investors at the moment?
Yeah, so I think what's getting most traction and attention right now is everything that's located around artificial intelligence. Because this is something that we're not only good at, but we do have a lot of research in that field. We have some very bright minds here and some really professional organizations. Secondly, of course, there's the gaming and entertainment industry, which is very large here as well. And thirdly, everything that's e-commerce related, of course. Yeah. And then on the other part, it's the supporting ecosystem around aviation, for example. Yeah, with Airbus and Lufthansa Industry Systems located here in Hamburg. There's a huge demand for, I don't know, software solutions, logistics solutions, and all that things that are surrounding sort of the adjacent fields of those industries. And then what's coming up right now is everything that's environmental related. Yeah? So we see a lot of startups getting founded, impact startups being built here. And we have some really notable examples. So we say, okay, this is really a huge, not only invention, but innovation. So an invention made commercially viable. Yeah? And this is super interesting because that somehow appeals to the politics as well. Yeah, because Hamburg as a city and state inside Germany isn't somehow, of course, unique because we do not have access to much land, for example. Yeah, so we have to be very careful with the few spots that we have. Yeah, and this has always driven environmental activities who are very common here in Hamburg as well. And this is one of the industries I would bet on. Yeah, and then another one, the last one to talk about is health. Everything that's health related. Yeah? So the health sector has always been huge in Hamburg, and the startup ecosystem in the health sector is also very, very vivid here in Hamburg.
Awesome. I want to continue our little Yorgo and my journey as a young startup in Hamburg. And thanks to you and your network, we've established a presence. We've gotten some grants from the city. We found some office space. We're working on getting some traction. We find our first customers. We get some early angel investment from some local champions for entrepreneurs. But now it's time for growth. And you mentioned there's only so much land around, and then also there's that funding gap. So as Yorgo and I, we have our startup. Now we need to scale up with our team. What's the talent like there? Are we able to find local talent, or are we leveraging talent internationally? Is it more expensive talent there as we scale up our operation?
It's not as cheap as in other cities, that's for sure, but it's not as expensive, for example, if you go to the south of Germany. Yeah, so because the cost of living, for example, in Munich is way higher than we have here in Hamburg. Yeah, so you can have a decent living here, and then of course appeals to workforce as well. Next thing is the quality of living here is very high, and this of course draws talent in as well. So then I think we have a total of 5 to 7 universities in the greater area of Hamburg, which always is a supply of talent that you have there. But nevertheless, it's always good advice to have a mixture, to have a diverse team, which is not only recruited from locals, but you bring on external talents as well, because that has always been one of our strengths. Yeah? So having reach out and enhancing our own networks by bringing in people from the outside, because they always bring their networks in as well. So, and this is of course again where the networking in Hamburg has its definite advantages. Yeah, because we do not. The Hamburg attitude is not that we fall in love with each other immediately. We're even sometimes a bit hesitant to make friends on a deeper level, but we're very open. And once we are committed to somebody, you got a friend for life. And this is super interesting because this really builds so strong foundations inside the networks that there's a very high level of reliability. And if I want to know who's the best talent to hire for my startup, it's a matter of 5 to 6 calls and I got the talent, due to the strong networks that we have here. And this is something that is pretty awesome.
We see in some ecosystems there's a level of trust. It might be hard to break in, maybe not hard, but a little more difficult, take some time. But once you're in, like you said, that trust is really important. And of course, as an entrepreneur, we have to build that with our teams and with our customers, et cetera, and with other vendors. So now you mentioned a lot of universities, like just churning out like students. We hear a lot of ecosystems talk about the university programs, but then on the other hand, they talk about the skills gaps. So can Yorgo and I count on sourcing and recruiting from the programs at university, or do we wait and sit back for them to get a year or two experience and then really lean on that quiet and trusted network?
I would work directly with the universities, and the networks that we have established there, because for the current generations of students, it's absolutely common to reach out to many companies that we have here in Hamburg. So once you are finished with your studies and got your exam in the pocket, you already have usually 2 to 3 years of working experience. Because this is just a normal CV for a student nowadays, at least here in Hamburg. And there's so much variety that then the young people can bring into it, because they have been in e-commerce, they have been in aviation, engineering, in trade, in you name it, you get logistics. And so with that diverse background, even in younger years, you can really have highly skilled workforce, which is still from a salary perspective, for example, suitable for startups, because you cannot afford to have the, 20 years in the job people, but the young ones, those who really push things forward, they already come up with a lot of experience, are very well educated, and most probably the best people to get here.
That is actually very encouraging, particularly because what we have noticed, Dirk, is that here in North America, more and more of the students, especially undergraduates, are trying to find meaningful internships, and very often unpaid internships. We do not have, with very few exceptions, we do not have the experience of what you have in Germany, namely the company training programs, this strong affiliation of taking young high school kids and integrating them into the business environment. What I was actually going to ask you to follow this conversation is really COVID, to focus for a moment on the last 15, 16 months. What changes have you seen, and what do you expect going forward?
It has changed almost everything, and the most visible thing is, of course, that a lot of the ways of working have changed dramatically. So just one example, my company, we haven't been to the office for more than 1 year right now. And of course, this makes everything difficult. So when we're talking about talent, onboarding an intern is pretty difficult and pretty different if you only have to rely on Zoom and Teams meetings, because there's nothing better than taking a new intern, a new colleague with you to the cantina in the lunchtime and introduce him or her to other people. All that has vanished. Same goes for the networking events. We now rely on virtual networking events where it's not as easy to just approach a partner, potential investor, or business angel or mentor and just have a chit chat. So now you need an appointment for everything. And this has made business really, really difficult here. we're trying to arrange with that, but since in Germany we are struggling with some reliable taking care of COVID-19 and all its downtakes that we have seen due to our federal system, where every county in the country is taking their own measures, is really difficult. Yeah, and so we are falling a bit behind that. Yeah, just today they were talking about again in our parliament about national measures to be undertaken, but they are always a compromise. Yeah, so we're talking about if the incident is above 100, then the state can have some additional measures. This is bonkers. To be frank, if you look at it from an economic perspective, I would rather do it like, I don't know, Portugal did it, like South Korea did it, like New Zealand did it, or something, which is short but heavy. So, and not this, we do it a bit here and do it a bit there, because this is not good for the economy, neither for the established economy nor for the startup ecosystem. And so this all has changed. And without the meeting culture that we have, that we nurture here in Hamburg, we had to really arrange ourselves. And I think everybody is waiting for the new normal and how we can get some sort of normality back. So because going out and meeting in cafes and something is almost as important as it is in cities like Vienna.
Which of course then brings the question, how wide has vaccination been in Germany? Are people over 30%, 40%, 50% vaccinated?
No, way below that. So I think we are now offering vaccinations for people along the 70s. So we do it pretty strictly by age. We started with the above 80s. Now we are in the 70s. And then, of course, priority groups. So if you have an existing pre-existing condition, for example, that will qualify you. But now, at the state of today, our parental generation is being vaccinated maybe by 50%, and everything that's below that is coming close to zero. If you're not in a system critical job, for example. This is something we're really struggling with. So the vaccination system is not working good.
The reason is because you don't have access to the vaccines, or is it because there's a hesitancy on behalf of the population?
No, there's not much hesitance. So of course you do have, as everywhere, people who are opposed to vaccines, and you have this movement somewhere in some parts of Germany or in some parts of the population who simply deny that there's something like a pandemic. You got them everywhere worldwide, but that's not the main cause. The main cause, as I see it, is bureaucracy. And a lack of coordination between the different states that we have, not only inside Germany, but throughout Europe. So because having such a huge federal system requires a lot of coordination efforts. And this is something, due to the fact that we didn't have the digital infrastructure, we're not good at. Because just one example, every morning on the radio, the new infection numbers are announced. And every Monday and Tuesday, you will hear the very same sentence: please do not rely on the numbers from the weekend, because not all authorities in Germany are reporting their numbers over the weekend. Come on, we're more than 1 year into the pandemic, and we still haven't solved that problem. So, and without reliable data, how will you build something that is reliable in terms of measurement? So I think this is really an organizational problem that we're facing here. It's not the missing access to vaccination or the population not willing to be vaccinated. My peers are all willing to be vaccinated.
Thank you. That is something that many of us here in the US, but also in our ecosystem, don't really know. The fact that it has been so, the medical system has been so regionalized in Germany. that, we're all very impressed. And I want to come back to what you mentioned before about artificial intelligence. We see a lot of good things coming out of Germany. We see a lot of brain-computer interface in terms of the next generation. What is your gut feeling? What is your sense? When are we going to see the next unicorn out of Hamburg?
That's, wow. If I knew that, I wouldn't be sitting here, but investing in that and getting rich over the next 3 years. Yeah. So, but nevertheless, it will happen kind of soon. Yeah. I don't know which one it will be, but it will be in the next 1 or 2 years. I'm pretty sure about that. And most likely it will be something that is close to traditional industries and sectors, but leveraging new technologies, especially artificial intelligence. That's what I'm pretty sure about. Yeah, and most likely it will come out of either the entertainment or logistics or health sector.
I was actually going to ask you if you was going to think it will be mobility related or automotive, because you have this tremendous infrastructure. Volkswagen had been leading the way, but of course, both Mercedes-Benz and the Volkswagen Audi group as a whole are beginning to move lock, stock, and barrel in the area.
Yeah, that's true, but automotive is not that big of an industry here in Hamburg. Yeah, so you have the hotspots in the area of Stuttgart and the area of Munich and Ulm and Ingolstadt and everywhere. So the south of Germany, they are really big in automotive. Plus Volkswagen in the middle of Germany. Some say it's the north, which would somebody from Hamburg always deny, but that's a regional discussion here. And then, of course, now with Tesla building the new factory close to Berlin, there will be another hotspot. And of course, you do have always the adjacent industries and ecosystems around that. So our focus has always been aviation in that terms and ships. Yeah, so cargo ships, passenger ships, that has always been a huge industry, and there's a lot of happening. Not so much the automotive sector.
So we have just a little bit left here as far as time. I want to get a little bit back to this new inaugural chapter for Startup Grind in Hamburg. Now,
yeah,
each one of us chapter directors, we're given all the autonomy we need. Like it's just like you serve your community how it needs to be served. You know best. You're on the ground, community level, bottom up. And when I started doing that in my community, I had a very specific. I had to do a lot of listening to find out what that need was. So I'm asking you, like, and what's the area of need in your ecosystem that you feel that you can best affect change in or move the dial for as you get started?
Yeah, I think one of the major topics that I want to work on is transparency. Yeah, so of course we do have our superstars here or our celebrities in our startup ecosystem as well. Yeah, I think it's not really helpful to put the very same guy for the 7th time in a row on a chair on a panel and let him give the very same talk. Yeah, so I would love to create more transparency about really what's happening below the surface. Yeah, so what are the drivers? And what I especially want to establish is a dialogue between startups, corporates, and politics. Yeah, because politics and government, they can do a lot, but they are not fully aware of what's happening here and the power and importance of this sector for the city of Hamburg and our economy. So having the chance or the opportunity to build more transparency there. And transparency is always a matter of networks. That is what I want to achieve. I have no clue if I will ever achieve that, to be honest, because right now I'm simply a learner. Yeah, so I'm just sitting there talking to other Startup Grind chapter directors. I'm totally amazed how they did it. I'm just like, okay, hopefully I can do that. But yeah, I'm kind of optimistic that somehow it will work out. Not in the next months, but hopefully in a year or something.
I think Yorgo and I have been all over the planet virtually with these discussions. And regardless of the mindset, whether it's extremely closed networks or open networks, chapter directors have had great success in building community, and that's really what we are. And so, you know, some it takes a little bit longer than others.
Yeah.
But it is there. It's just a matter of, you know, being available and offering that that warm environment that we spoke about at the opening of the hour. And one of the best things that we can do as chapter directors is not get tied down by a message that comes with money, perhaps, right? So because we don't have money to invest, and we're not taking it from anybody, that we don't have an agenda except for be helpful, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and sometimes
Yeah.
people still are like, "Are you sure? That sounds too good to be true." But you know, we just have to prove our case.
Yeah, but this is exactly what highly resonated with me. Yeah, so because you know, I've been mentoring for some global accelerators, for example, and there was always this commercial agenda in the background. Yeah, where they said, okay, this is somehow biased. Yeah, and I do believe that. I have no clue who will have the next billion-dollar idea, but if I have any chance to help them achieve their goals, everybody will participate. So this will be a benefit for everybody, and this is my chance to contribute and to give back, because I have learned so much from different people over the past, I do feel the need to give something back there. And since I don't have money to give back, it's network, it's ideas, it's connections, and it's community. And this is what highly resonated for me when I experienced it, for example, at the Global Summit in San Francisco, because this is exactly what I felt there. So people were in it for the cause and not for anything else.
Right. Now, Yorgo, I'm going to ask you a question before we get to the last questions that we ask our guests every time.
Sure.
So, in the 100+ conversations that we've had with ecosystem builders around the planet, some like have been doing it for 10 years, some of them have been doing it for like 6 months. Understanding what Dirk just said to us about what his vision is for starting his chapter, is there anything from our previous conversations that comes to mind that we can offer Dirk, or connections?
As he was talking about the willingness of giving back to the community, a couple of things stand out. First of all, it took us about 8 months, and we're now being asked by fellow directors from around the globe for ideas, for contacts, and so on and so forth. Dirk, it is fascinating that from as far as southern eastern China or India or Bulgaria, we are being given access to deal flow, to ideas, to collaborative opportunities. So the network is working, and it will take time before we find the right idea, the right company, the right team to press the button and say, okay, we are going to collaborate on this cross-border. The second thing is that these discussions that we're having are meaningful in their own right, in the sense that the more we talk, the more we exchange not only information and ideas, but a mind frame. The idea of being successful and being habitually successful. Success is not about money. Success is about the habit of being positive in your outlook. And I think the third aspect to all this is that the human capital benefits from these kinds of conversations. Corey and I have been very fortunate to learn from other directors from around the globe about whether they were women, whether they were minorities, whether they were in places that nobody would have ever considered talking to them. And alternatively, we also see that people are paying attention to what we're doing. And I'm sure you will find that the more you talk to your local newspapers, the more you talk to financial press about what you're doing, the more people will be coming back to you, particularly because of the bottlenecks that you described, the regional structure of decision making, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Corey, I hope I have answered your question.
That's great. And that you landed there as far as like is the global network that we have, and that's where our last question lies. Is what can the global network of Startup Grind chapter directors, members, ecosystem builders, investment companies that listen to this program, what can we do for you? What can we do for Dirk? Or what can we do for your chapter or your community?
Most likely that is a question that I can answer in roughly 3 to 4 months. Yeah, not really now. I have to be really honest with that. But then there will be a need for access to the network. Because when you build a startup nowadays, you of course have always the ambition to make it somehow meaningful, and that usually comes along with the attitude or the vision to make it big and to make it global, or at least international. So, and then of course, I think such a global network will be the most important thing, because it's not really a good idea to just take the next plane, fly to another country, and try, okay, I want to replicate what I did in Hamburg there. So and this access to the local ecosystems and networks will be of high value to our community here. That's what I'm pretty sure about. But I don't have any concrete asks right now. Because right now it's more like, if you ever, or everybody who's listening to this ever comes to Hamburg, please get in touch with me, and I can introduce you to the local system. So.
Let's thank you. We will check back with you, absolutely. Before we leave, Yorgo, any last thought?
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank Dirk for his time, for his interest in joining us. I would like to wish him great successes going forward. And he's very, very fortunate because he's standing on the shoulders of giants. From the history of the Universität Hamburg to the innovation that we've seen over the last several centuries coming out of the area. I wish him the best of luck.
Thanks a lot.
And of course, I don't know. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. I think you have a relationship with Dirk, and entrepreneurs. We desperately need that support.
True.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
So grateful for your participation, Dirk. We'll look forward to connecting with you in a few months. And of course, anything that you need at all, reach out to Yorgo and myself. We're happy to provide access to the network that we've developed. As you've already seen, Startup Grind is just a bunch of people just looking to help. So thank you so much. And how do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
Easiest thing is via my connections, social media presence, LinkedIn, whatever. I'm pretty good reachable. So simply search for Dirk Ploss. There are not so many, and then you'll find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And then we'll talk again soon. All right. So appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me.